Healthy relationships rise and fall on boundaries. You either have boundaries in your relationship or you don't. You either have boundaries that determine what you're going to allow and what you expect from the person you're in a relationship with, or you don't. And the strength and health of your relationship will be determined by the health of these boundaries. So in this video, I want to help us with a little quiz to determine if we might have boundary issues, and then we're going to talk about 4 steps to begin implementing boundaries in your relationship. That's today on Relation Shots. Welcome to Relation Shots. My name is Eric Woot, and if this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. Imagine that. If you haven't already done so, click on the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss upcoming videos. If you want a free guide to intimacy, click on the link below in the description area. You also find other resources to help you in your relationship there. So let's talk boundaries. A healthy relationship is a relationship with reasonable and healthy boundaries. It's a relationship where 2 partners are willing to both take responsibility for their behaviors and actions in the relationship. So before we dig in too deep, let's just kind of define this idea of boundary. Boundary is simply a property line that determines what you're responsible for and what the other person in a relationship is responsible for. Think of it like a fence line. The stuff on my side of the fence, I got to take care of. The stuff on your side of the fence, you take care of. So healthy emotional boundaries in a relationship are where I take responsibility for my emotions and actions, and at the same time, I'm not willing to take responsibility for your emotions and actions. That's what you have to take responsibility for. So then you have 2 partners who are both taking responsibility for their own attitudes, thoughts, behaviors, language, actions that are impacting the relationship. If you're not sure exactly whether you have good, healthy boundaries, I'm going to play a little game with you. We're going to play a little game called You Might Have Boundary Issues If. And you got to answer every one of these questions, and this will help you evaluate how you're doing in the boundaries issue. So here we go with You Might Have Boundary Issues If. You might have boundary issues if you feel like people take advantage of you or use your emotions for their own gain. You often have to save people close to you and fix their problems all the time. You might have boundaries issues if you get more invested or attracted to a person than you should be for how long you've known them. This is you that are all in after like 3 weeks. You might have boundary issues if your relationships swing from amazing to horrible with no in-between. If you stay in breakup, makeup pattern relationships ongoing. If you tell people how much you hate drama, but you always seem to be in the middle of it. If you spend a lot of time defending yourself for things you believe aren't your fault. And finally, if you get sucked into pointless fighting or debating regularly, you might have boundary issues. So listen, if you scored poorly on this, it's not the end of the world. It's called self-awareness. And with self-awareness, we can make some changes. So let's talk about 4 steps to begin setting healthy boundaries in your relationship. This will help you over the long term. So step number 1 is you need to determine what boundaries you want to set. So it could be anything. And this is real simple, but it's not always easy, especially if you're a people pleaser, you're a rescuer, you're fearful that you might lose the relationship. Those are some of the reasons we have a hard time setting a boundary, but you just have to determine what boundary you want to set. So let's give an example. Let's say that you're in a relationship and the other person is often demeaning, critical, yells at you, and you've decided, you know what, I don't deserve that kind of behavior towards me. So I'm going to set a boundary and I'm no longer willing to allow that type of behavior in the relationship. Congratulations, you just determined your first boundary. Now what do you do about it? Step number 2 is decide on the consequences for when the boundary is broken. Now, this is not punitive. This is not revenge. This is simply, what are you going to do when the other person breaks your boundary? Because they will. It's a new boundary for them. There's going to be some expectation that they'll probably break it. And if you're trying to decide what to do in the moment, it's probably not going to go real well. Your emotions are high or you're fearful or whatever it is. So you determine the consequence for when they step over that boundary. So back to our example. They talk to you crazy, they yell at you, they criticize you. So you decide the consequence is, if we're on the phone and they begin doing this, I'm going to politely end the conversation and hang up the phone. If we're in person, then my consequence is I'm going to politely and respectfully end the conversation, let them know they've crossed the boundary, and then I'm either going to step away or, if need be, I'm actually going to leave the situation. That becomes the consequence. So now you have a boundary and you have the consequence for when that boundary is crossed. Step number 3 is you need to clearly communicate the boundary and consequence to your partner. You got to let them know. Let them know what's going on, what you're no longer going to accept anymore, and what you will do if they don't respect your boundaries. So you go to your partner and you say, hey, when you yell at me and criticize me and kind of demean me, here's how it impacts me and makes me feel. I'm no longer willing to allow that. So I've decided that if you decide to talk to me like that, if I'm on the phone, I'm going to politely end the conversation and hang up. If I'm in person, I'm going to end the conversation, either walk away or leave the situation. And if you'd like to resume conversation with me, then you'll apologize for your actions and we can begin a conversation and try again. Now you've communicated the clear boundary and consequence to your partner. And step 4 is simply follow through. You've determined the boundary, you've determined the consequence, you've clearly communicated that to your partner. Now you just got to follow through. The next time they cross the boundary, and they will, do not expect to set a new boundary requiring new behavior and the person to get it right 100% of the time going forward. They're going to stumble a few times. So you set the boundary and then you follow through. The next time they do it, you do what you said you would do. And this can be hard again if you're worried about the relationship or you don't like conflict. But this is the only way to have a healthy relationship, so you just have to follow through. And if you find yourself with a partner who is unwilling to respect reasonable and healthy boundaries and is unwilling to take accountability for their own actions and how they impact you, if you're dating, that's not a relationship you want to be in. I promise you, you need to get out of that relationship. If they've proven they're unwilling to respect your boundaries, that's not going to be a good situation. If you're already married, it gets a little more complicated. I wouldn't give up after first try. What I would say is seek a counselor, maybe some outside help, a mentor couple who can step in and help provide additional accountability for you and your partner to help you guys establish healthy boundaries for the relationship. Hopefully, if the person is committed to the relationship, their desire is the best relationship possible. And even though boundaries can be frustrating because it forces us to change behavior and develop new habits, hopefully they'll be willing to adjust and push through on that. So there's a few questions to help evaluate if you might have boundary issues and 4 steps to begin starting boundaries in your relationship. I'd love to hear your comments, so you can drop one in the comment section below. If there's any other help we can provide for you in your relationship, check out some of the resources in the description area below. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on Relationshots.